There's a country in the Himalayas with fewer people than a mid-sized American city, no coastline, no highway to the outside world, and a government that until fairly recently didn't allow television. And yet, over the last 5 years, that same government has quietly become one of the largest state holders of Bitcoin on earth, bigger in dollar terms than most Fortune 500 crypto treasuries, bigger than most countries you could name. This is the story of how a nation that measures its success in gross national happiness ended up playing one of the boldest financial bets in the world, and how it's connected to something as simple as a river. Let's start with the scale, because scale is the whole story. Bhutan is roughly the size of Switzerland, but where Switzerland built its economy on banking secrecy and precision manufacturing, Bhutan had almost none of the ingredients economists usually point to for growth. No major ports, no oil, no large domestic market to sell to. 80% of the country is mountains so steep that building a single road can take a decade. If you were a World Bank economist in 1960, you would have looked at Bhutan and written it off. Landlocked, mountainous, tiny population, virtually no industry. On paper, it had almost nothing going for it, except one thing: water. Bhutan sits directly beneath some of the tallest mountains on earth. Glaciers melt, rain falls, and all of that water has nowhere to go but downhill, fast, steep, and constant. That's not just scenery, that's kinetic energy for free all year round. And right next door is a country of 1.4 billion people with a growing middle class and a chronic structured need for more electricity: India. So Bhutan did something that looks almost too simple to be a national strategy. It built dams, lots of them, and it sold the power next door. The first big one, Chukha, came online in 1986. India funded most of it, 60% as an outright grant, the rest as a low-interest loan. That's an important detail because it sets the pattern for almost every hydropower project Bhutan has built since. Bhutan provides the geography, India provides the capital, and the electricity flows south across the border. It worked. Chukha alone eventually became one of the most profitable single assets in Bhutan's economy. So Bhutan kept building. Tala in 2007, Mangdichu in 2019, and right now 2 more mega dams, Punazangchu 1 and 2, are being finished after years of delay. Here's the number that matters today. Hydropower makes up somewhere between a fifth and a third of Bhutan's entire government revenue depending on the year, and a staggering 40 to 60% of everything Bhutan sells to the rest of the world. One resource, one customer, one river system. That's either the smartest resource strategy in South Asia or the riskiest, and Bhutan knows it. Multiple government reports have flagged the same fear in almost the same words: don't put all your eggs in one basket. Which is exactly why, starting around 2019, Bhutan started building a second basket, a stranger one. For years, hidden inside industrial buildings in Bhutanese mountains, behind unmarked doors with teal metal roofs barely visible through pine trees, Bhutan has been running Bitcoin mines. Not private companies, not some rogue speculators, the actual sovereign wealth fund of the Kingdom of Bhutan, an organization called Druk Holding and Investments, has been turning surplus electricity into Bitcoin since 2019, when Bitcoin was trading for about $5,000 a coin. Think about why that makes sense for this specific country. Bhutan's hydropower has a seasonal problem. In summer, glacier melt and monsoon rain sends river roaring. Bhutan generates more electricity than it can sell or use. In winter, the rivers slow down and Bhutan actually has to import power from India to cover the shortfall. Selling that surplus summer power to India is cheap. India pays a fixed modest tariff, but you can export a battery that stores electricity for 6 months. Or can you in a different form? That's the argument Bhutanese officials started making internally. Bitcoin mines converts electricity directly into a globally liquid, that is storable asset. You mine in the summer when power is nearly free, and you are holding something that can be sold in the depths of winter or held for years regardless of the season. One official at the Sovereign Fund put it almost exactly this way: Bitcoin mined from hydropower surplus functions like a foreign currency reserve. So how much did Bhutan actually mine? By late 2024 at the peak, Bhutan's holding ratio roughly 13,000 Bitcoin. Let that number sit for a second. At the prices Bitcoin was trading at during that peak, the stockpile was worth over $1.4 billion. In a country whose entire annual GDP is only around $3 billion, Bhutan briefly held Bitcoin worth somewhere closely to 40% of its national economy. And Bhutan wasn't finished. In 2023, it partnered with a Singapore-based mining company, Biddeer, to build a $500 million mining operation, new facilities in Gedu and Jikmeling, adding hundreds of megawatts of dedicated mining capacity, expected to eventually mine close to a dozen of Bitcoin per day. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but this is still just a small country doing something unusual with spare electricity. But here's where it gets more consequential, because in 2023, Bhutan needed money for something very human. That is, raising the salaries of the country's own civil servants, many of whom were quitting and moving abroad because the pay simply wasn't competitive. So Bhutan started selling, not all at once, in careful, staggered transaction time to price surges. In one 4-day window in July 2025 alone, as Bitcoin surged past $120,000, Bhutan sold over 500 coins for roughly $60 million. Over the following months, sales accelerated. By mid-2026, on-chain analysts tracking the government's wallet found that Bhutan's holding had fallen from that 13,000 BTC peak to somewhere around 3,000, a drawdown of more than 75%. That money didn't vanish into nowhere. Reported uses include doubling certain civil servant salaries and more recently a formal pledge for up to 10,000 Bitcoin towards funding Gelephu Mindfulness City, a new special economic zone. Bhutan is building near its southern border, designed to combine sustainable development, digital finance, and yes, more crypto infrastructure. Bitcoin isn't the only place Bhutan has turned smallness into strategy. Look at tourism. Most countries that depend on tourism play a volume game. More flights, more hotels, more visitors, cheaper prices. Bhutan does the opposite. Foreign visitors to Bhutan pay a mandatory sustainable development fee, roughly $100 for every night they stay, on top of their regular travel costs. The government has openly said it could physically host around 300,000 tourists a year, but in recent years, only around half that number actually came. Most government would panic under capacity and slash prices. Bhutan hasn't, because the fee was never really about maximizing headcount. It's a deliberate scarcity mechanism. Fewer visitors, each paying more, spread the ecological footprint thinner while the direct government revenue per tourist staying high. It's the same logic as luxury brand users: raise the pricing, filter out the crowding, the strain on roads, hospital and monasteries, built for population of a few 100,000, not a mass tourist market. Compare that to a country like Thailand, which welcomed roughly 35 million international visitors in a single recent year. Thailand's tourism strategy is volume, Bhutan's is margin. Neither is wrong, but only one of them is a viable model for a country with Bhutan's population and territory. So the same instinct, turn limits into leverage, shows up almost everywhere you look in Bhutan's economy. The country didn't have enough people or capital to build heavy industry, so instead of trying to compete on manufacturing, it built its entire international identity around scarcity and preservation, which includes strict environmental protection, forest covers locked into the constitutional at a minimum of 60%, a national policy that explicitly prioritizes gross national happiness over GDP growth. So if I talk a bit about gross national happiness became effectively Bhutan's brand, and brand is an economic asset. It's the reason a small Himalayan kingdom with no natural marketing budget became instantly recognizable worldwide. The reason travel documentaries get made about it, the reason luxury travelers are willing to pay a premium just to say that they have been to Bhutan. So basically, scarcity, environmental protection, and national identity turn out to be exportable products in their own right, even though none of them showed up on a normal balance sheet. Bhutan is growing. GDP growth has actually outpaced most of its South Asian neighbors in recent years, driven largely by new hydropower coming online. Bhutan graduated out of the United Nations least developed country category in December 2023, a genuine milestone very few countries achieve. But underneath the growth numbers, there's a quieter crisis. Youth unemployment in Bhutan has sat around 20% in recent years. Roughly 1 in 5 young Bhutanese who want a job can't find one that matches their skills or pays enough to stay. And when the economy can't absorb its own graduates, they leave. Migration out of Bhutan, especially to Australia, has become one of the most discussed social issues inside the country. Village elders in interview describe entire graduating classes leaving almost as a group. And this is the tension underneath everything we just covered. Hydropower revenue mostly flows to government coffers and state-owned corporations. It doesn't directly create the kind of white-collar tech or service sector jobs that a 25-year-old with a university degree is looking for. Tourism, which is deliberately capped, only supports a limited number of jobs by design, and Bitcoin mining is a capital intensive, not labor intensive. A handful of engineers can run the facility that used to take hundreds of workers in the traditional industry. So Bhutan finds itself in an unusual position now. A government with genuinely clever, well-run macroeconomic strategy and a generation of its own citizens who don't feel the cleverness translating into their own lives. Gelephu Mindfulness City, the new special economic zone partly funded by that Bitcoin reserve, is explicitly designed to try to fix this, to create the kind of high-value jobs that keeps young Bhutanese from leaving. So whether it works is, as of this filming, is still an open question. Step back and Bhutan's entire economic playbook starts to look like one consistent idea repeated in three completely different forms. It couldn't win by being big, so it made smallness the strategy. Sell the one resource it had in true abundance, water, to other customer next door who needed it most. It couldn't win on tourist volume, so it made scarcity the product, charging more to host fewer people and protect the very landscape that makes it valuable. And when its main export turned out to be dangerously concentrated in a single customer, a single resource, and a single season, it didn't diversify into something safe and boring. It diversified into the most volatile asset in modern finance, using electricity that would otherwise go to waste and turn out to be right often enough to fund real government spending with it. None of that guarantees Bhutan's future. A country this small, this dependent on one river system and one neighbor, one volatile digital asset and one fragile tourism formula, is still standing on a narrow foundation. The youth unemployment numbers are real. The crypto bet could have gone the other way. The next decades of hydropower construction is already running behind schedule the way the last one did. But the core lesson travels well beyond the Himalayas. You don't need to be big to be strategic. You need to know exactly what you have and exactly who wants it. If a country of around 800,000 people can turn a river into seed at the global economic table, the real question isn't whether Bhutan will keep pulling this off. It's what your own river is. What's the one thing you have that somebody else desperately needs?